I'm Tom Adler, and I'm here in Brookston, Indiana, in the studio of ceramic artist Susan Frost. We have 8 pieces of Susan's in our permanent collection. We have 3 clowns and a couple of dragons and a monster and a vase and an egg. And they form a kind of unique subset of our permanent collection since her ceramics are very different from the other pieces that we have. I thought maybe I'd start, Susan, by asking you, at what point in your career did you start doing these very sort of fantastical, whimsical kinds of pieces? Were you always doing them, or did you do the traditional cups and saucers first, or what?
Well, I've never been a real potter person. I think I started mostly with creatures years ago when I was in my master's program. And of course, when I was little and I had clay, I would do mermaids and different creatures. I've always been fascinated by fantastical sort of objects, and so I did start simply and then got more sophisticated. In the beginning, I used to make them and glaze them. You've got some that are glazed, and then I decided that sort of covered up a lot of the detail, so I moved to unglazed, and still in the process of evolving. And
so there was no specific inspiration, it was just sort of a lifelong interest in these kinds of creatures?
Yeah, I mean, from reading books and looking at illustrations in books, and just looking at other art. It's usually the animal aspect that excites me. I'm also very interested in architecture, and I haven't moved into that really yet. I sort of started to do that. I do some carving. I started carving some tiles, and moving towards some more abstract, away from being quite so literal, like I've been in the past, which 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes,
Recurrently, you do clowns and you do sort of dragons. Is there any reason for those particular images to keep coming up or not?
Actually, clowns were sort of the first thing that I started doing when I broke away from mugs or something. I did some clowns, and then I moved to a sort of dragon creature. And so I haven't done a clown, and you probably have the the clowns. I really like them.
We have 3 of the clowns, yes.
But I haven't done any clowns for many years.
The process that you use, I mean, many of the ones we have in the museum, they look like hollow vessel forms, as though they started that way and then evolved into something like, we have that wonderful dragon, which, sort of like, it's like Puff the Magic Dragon or something. Do you want to talk a bit about the process of shaping the figures and so forth?
Yeah, I'm going to reach in front of you just for a second here. I throw a shape on the wheel, and it is hollow, and like this one just started out as kind of an egg shape, and then I just start pushing and shaping until I begin to see a little personality, and then I add some legs or whatever, and I work with porcelain, which I found pushes really well. Push here and it bulges out there, and when I've tried it with stoneware or other clays, it doesn't do that as much. So even though porcelain is a lot more difficult to work with, I can put a lot of work in a piece, and then it comes out, and look at that crack. Darn. Yeah. But so they do start out hollow most of the time, and then I do a lot of hand building on the pieces.
On the pieces we have, you have a sort of signature of the dots.
Yes.
And maybe it adds texture, but is it difficult to do those dots in the way that you do on your pieces?
No, it's just time consuming. It's colored clay, porcelain, liquid porcelain with colorants added. And they're in a squeeze bottle.
Oh, okay.
with a thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to be applied at the right time, just the right leather hard stage so that it will stick.
Mm-hmm.
If it's too wet, the dots will just smush out, and if it's too dry, they won't
Okay.
stick. So timing
Is everything.
is important,
Yeah.
but it's
No, I noticed even on the vase we have and on the egg we have,
Mhm.
they're just covered with these decorative
yeah, I like
dots.
that texture.
Okay.
that
But did
sort
you
of tactile
was that something you
sense.
came upon on your own that you just started doing, or had you been
I
inspired by
think-
somebody, or?
Well, I've done jewelry in the past.
Okay.
And Fabergé work,
Yes.
always just all that detail, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say I'd be influenced by that,
Mhm.
although there's no comparison, really. I'm not using diamonds and rubies and emeralds.
Yeah.
But,
The clowns have a wonderful color palette, but you've moved away from that into more monochromatic or natural colors. I mean, we have in our collection the twin to this, which
Right.
is a matte finish. I think it looks. Is it a,
Right.
yeah, and I mean, except with the painted nails and the
Nails,
eyes. And when I look at the one in the museum, it reminds me a little bit of Yoda, but it
Uh-huh.
also reminds me of the gargoyles that you
Uh-huh.
find in the medieval cathedrals and
Which
so
I think
forth.
are wonderful.
Yeah,
up
wonderful,
there. Yeah.
wonderful, sort of mythical creatures.
Right.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the technique of this, less colorful, but maybe more? Is it more difficult to achieve?
No. It's really just adding the liquid colorant over the bisqued piece. I
Mhm.
make the piece, and there's usually, probably I would have painted the nails and painted
Mhm.
the eyes, and in this piece the eyes were glazed. But the rest of the body, after I bisque it once, I will paint the colorant on and then just wipe it off, and it will stay in the recessed areas.
Okay.
That's something I struggle with about the color. I
Mm.
miss having all that color and trying to figure
Mhm.
out how I want to move back into color,
Mm-hmm.
because I will make a piece and like this one, for example, and how would I get more color on it without it looking just more ceramic,
Yes.
if you know what
yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the things that's a challenge for me right now is how I am going to work color back in,
Yeah, no,
because
the-
I do miss it.
Yeah, the twin we have to this has those wonderful lavender nails,
Uh-huh.
plus the colored
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself moving in any new directions right now, or?
I do. There's several directions that I like to move in. I've had an idea for many years of using my creatures as illustrations
Oh, okay.
in books.
In books.
In some stories.
Mhm.
And then, as I mentioned before, I'd also, I think I'm going to work on some wall pieces,
Oh, okay.
maybe even some paper clay, but that are more architectural
Mhm.
and may have some animal elements to it.
Mm-hmm.
And something with color, however I'm going to get those
Mhm.
splashes of color in. But yeah, I think part of me wants to move towards some things that aren't quite so literal.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll be excited when
When you discover
I make
what it
that
is.
transition.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably have had a number of occasions to write artist statements about yourself and your work.
Mhm.
Are there any brief little comments you'd like to make on your philosophy as an artist, or what you're trying to achieve or feel you have achieved?
Well, when I am creating a piece, I am usually, I feel like I am communing with it about in a certain feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the more I work on it, the more I feel like this piece. When I look at it, it causes me to.
Yeah, because it's very
Mirror the
Yeah, what you do
expression.
is very tactile. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but this guy seems kind of thoughtful and yet mischievous.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look at each one of my pieces, it reminds me of the feeling.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that's what I try to capture in my pieces is to evoke some sort of response with the viewer, that they would have a feeling, a response to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure being here, and thanks for inviting us into your studio.
Well, you're welcome. Glad to have you here. Thank you.